If you want a heavy-duty pocket knife that could stand up to some real tough abuse, you're gonna have to spend a good bit of money to get something that's worth it. But is that actually true? David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center, and today we're looking at these iconic folding hard-use knives and some budget alternatives to see if they're up to the challenge. So when we're talking hard-use pocket knives, of the things you want to look for, strength is the through line. You want a strong lock that's not going to give up under pressure. You want a strong handle that's can support the structure of that locking mechanism, and you want a strong blade, either through the use of a tougher alloy or through thicker steel, so that even less tough steels can compete. Sure, edge retention and efficient slicing geometry are nice, but those priorities are going to take a little bit of a back seat to durability in this case. Because after all, edge retention doesn't mean anything if your blade gives up under pressure. We're going to start with this icon right here, the ZT562. It is a frame lock flipper knife, and the frame lock is kind of, I think, the turning point. When the frame lock came onto the market, the turning point between previous folding knives and true modern hard use folding knives. Yeah, there were strong lockbacks before that, but the frame lock made a name on its durability. You've got titanium in this case with the handle itself locking up against the blade, and as you squeeze and use this knife, your hand actually keeps the lock pushed into that lock position, even if it were to somehow slip. This particular version of the 562 is the one for the list today. The micarta for the front scale is the visual giveaway. It's got a nice texture to it. It holds the hand quite nicely, but MagnaCut steel is what really sells the whole package right here. MagnaCut is a stainless steel with good edge retention, but it's also got very high toughness, higher toughness than previous versions of the 562. The blade is 3.5 inches long. It's a drop point. It's a little thicker than your average blade nowadays. So combine that with the toughness of the MagnaCut and the strength of that frame lock, it is very durable. It's also got some nice details like this over-travel disc here on the back. That is something originally invented by Rick Hinderer, who is the designer of this knife and is well known in hard-use folding knife circles. We've also got a lock bar interface, so it's steel on steel when the blade is open. So it's a very compelling package overall. It is about $300, however. What can you get? It gets you in this kind of ballpark for less. Best I could come up with here was the SOG Tellus FLK. Here they are side by side. This is a $50 knife. It's a little bit kind of broader actually than the 562 in its appearance. Blade is a little bit longer, 3.65 inches, 440C steel here. Not the toughest steel under the sun and certainly not the equal to MagnaCut, but enough thickness at that spine where it should still be pretty okay. You've got injection molded handles and sort of a hybrid liner slash frame lock. I guess it's more of a liner lock technically, but you have this section of handle attached that moves with the liner itself. Overall, it gives very similar vibes. It gives the same ability for as you use your hand to reinforce that locking position, and it flips open in similar fashion here. Check it out. What do you folks think? Worthy budget alternative to the 562? The next icon is the LionSteel SR-11, which is a derivation of the SR-1 that takes the frame lock concept and makes it even stronger through integral construction. This handle here is a single piece rather than two pieces or two sides attached together, like on the ZT. And you can get this knife with either aluminum or titanium handles for a bit more money. Super strong, of course, and it also comes with LionSteel's rotoblock mechanism right here, which looks kind of similar to that over-travel arrestor. But what you do is you can screw that down, and that prevents the lock bar from moving at all. So in addition to your hand and the lock itself, you've got another lock for your frame lock security right there, which is very cool. Blade steel here is Sleipner steel, a little bit on the thicker side, crowned spine here as well. So you've got something that kind of breaks the hard edges that makes it more comfortable to use. Also less of an opportunity for fracturing on that hard edge. The sharpened edge itself has one more tough hard use trick up its sleeve, and that is a convex grind, which think of like an axe. It has that type of grind. It's designed for smashing and hard hitting. You've got that on this knife blade right here, which is very cool. Now, the aluminum versions of this knife come in just about $182 right now. So it's not vastly expensive like some of the knives on this list. So it's actually harder to find a budget substitute. The best I could do here is the Kizer Brat. Comes in about $89, and you've got an integral G10 handle. And while G10 isn't metal, of course, it's essentially a fiberglass material. So this is going to be a very strong handle. The rest of the knife, feels less hard use, however, to me. You got a 3.5-inch blade, 154 cm, and very distinctly on the thin side. This is a slicer for sure, and the button lock as well doesn't inspire the same kind of hard use vibes as a frame lock, especially if you're kind of indiscriminately, cutting with the knife and, handling it roughly. You just have to be careful you're not going to accidentally hit that button during your work. So this is one where, it might be you have to spend a little bit more money to get that integral frame lock strength. If anyone knows of some alternatives, however, that I might have missed, drop them in the comments below. The next knife I want to talk about is this, the Cold Steel SR-11, and the name behind the lock of this knife, Andrew Demko. Now, if there's any name kind of more closely associated and iconic within hard use pocket knife circles, Andrew Demko is right up there. Rick Hinderer would be another good option too, but Demko has created more or contributed more unique locking mechanisms to the market in the hard use sphere than anyone else I can think of. This is the triad lock on the SR-11. Looks like a lockback, but it is designed internally to be stronger. The geometries help it self-adjust over time. You've got a stop pin there, allowing it to basically just everything about it is stronger than a typical lockback. And it is considered kind of the thing to beat if you're designing a new hard use, strong locking mechanism. And I could think of no more appropriate knife for this video featuring this lock than the SR-11. Check out how chunky that blade is right there. That's a 4.5 millimeter thick blade. It's 4 inches long, so you've got plenty of reach right there. S35 VN steel here, which before MagnaCut was kind of considered the most well-balanced stainless steel out there in terms of a good combination of edge retention and toughness. MagnaCut is definitely tougher, but S35 is still a very good choice. You can get it in this clip point or a drop or a Tonto profile. In addition to the thickness, you've only got sort of a saber height flat grind here, so it is a very sturdy geometry. Again, slicing is not the primary consideration when we're thinking hard use. You want indestructibility. The handle itself is G10. Pretty generous amount of room on that knife right there, reversible pocket clip, the whole 9 yards, and a nice wide pocket clip, kind of helping live up to the heavy duty standards of this knife. It's about $144 for this, which again, not a terrible proposition in terms of value, fairly attainable. But for a budget alternative, this one's kind of a gimme slash no-brainer. The SR-11 Lite from Cold Steel as well. Here is the Tonto bladed version, so you can see both of the blades right there. This knife is 40 bucks, and for 40 bucks, it is real hard to beat the sheer, beefy hard use value of this knife. 8CR13 MOV steel here, so not an edge retention champ, but still a very durable steel, especially on this budget range of the spectrum. And you still got the same thickness as the full-size knife. Really, the biggest difference in feel between the two knives is, the handle with that injection molded. And even then, they're not too far off from each other. There you go. We're going to talk about 2 more Andrew Demko locks now. First is the Scorpion lock on the Cold Steel AD-15. It is this metal yoke here at the spine side of the handle. That is your lock. You lift it up, as you can see right there. Has the same advantage of a frame lock in that as you hold the knife, your hand is reinforcing the already strong lock. And being locked up by that lock is an S35 VN blade. Again, about 3.7 inches on this particular one. And about $185 for this black coated version. That's on the higher end, 173, I think, for satin bladed versions as opposed to the black here. This is another one where kind of Cold Steel already makes the budget version here with the AD15 Lite, about $91 right here. So not a huge price gap and not really as cheap as the as the SR1 Lite, of course, but I couldn't really think of a better budget alternative to this knife than itself in this case. Again, I welcome your suggestions, however. But the AUS 10 blade steel on this knife is solid stuff. It's got some decent toughness, decent enough anyway, especially when combined with the thickness of the blade stock here, which is not super thick compared to some of these, but still certainly thick enough. The other cool thing the Scorpion lock gives you, which I haven't talked about yet, is what I call a finger safe closing action, meaning your fingers stay completely out of the blade path when you're closing the knife, which is just another inherent kind of passive safety measure, which I like. The third Andrew Demko lock we're going to talk about today also has that finger safe closing action, that being the Shark lock on his iconic AD20 design. This one is actually an AD20S, which means it comes with slightly thinner blade steel than some of the fuller sized versions, which can have some chunkier blades. But even this is going to be plenty durable, I think. 20 CV on this particular clip point version, but several different steels have been run on this, including some tougher steels than the 20 CV right here. 3.65 inches on the blade, G10 handles, and the Shark lock right there, which is quite strong and finger safe as mentioned. Gives you a nice thumb ramp to choke up or to put your thumb on when you're kind of really pushing into a heavier cut. That actually helps with those heavier cuts. Like all of these knives so far as well, we've also got a significant finger guard, giving you more to push on when you really need to push on the knife. Not really much more to add. It's finger safe closing and incredibly strong, fun and satisfying to use, plenty of options. If you don't have the $450 that this particular knife goes for, which is on the lower end of the affordability spectrum in the grand scheme of the AD20 range, what do you get? Well, you could go with the AD20.5. It is a smaller version. This Shark's Foot version is only about a 3-inch blade, significantly thinner, still has a bit of the durability or durable feel built in. The blade stock is not super thin. The lock itself has the same properties, just on a smaller scale there. And this particular KnifeCenter exclusive with a K110 D2 style blade is only about 95 bucks. But it kind of feels like its own thing. Is this really an alternative to this full size one here? I'll let you use your judgment. But what I would say you ought to look at instead could be this, the Cold Steel Atlas right here. This lock was not designed by Andrew Demko, but it operates in a similar fashion, as you can see right there. And the most inexpensive versions of the Atlas come in at about $166 right now. And that comes with an S35 VN blade, which we've already talked about. That's very worth its weight in terms of performance. 3.5-inch blade, thick enough, with a stout enough grind overall. And they tend to have a little slightly thicker edges than some too, again, adding to the durability of this knife. Not quite as roomy of a handle, but a more comfortable choke up point for that finger choil area than the full-size AD20, I would say. Your mileage may vary depending on your finger size. And similar operation, you have to choke a little further back on the handle. Even this version right here, this is one of the more expensive versions with XHP steel. It's in the $200 range. Still, not quite half price compared to the full-size AD20S right here, but good option. All right, we're gonna keep the finger safe train going for a little bit longer. We've got this knife right here, the M16 from CRKT, an iconic tactical knife, but now with the versions using their deadbolt lock, really, I think, fully transitions into that hard use category, even more so than any of the previous editions of this knife. This is the full-sizer, 4-inch or thereabouts D2 Tonto blade, $145 or so right there. D2, of course, not the toughest steel. We haven't really addressed that yet. It has, nice big hard carbides in the steel, which allow it to hold an edge a good long time, but they kind of work against it in the toughness factor a little bit. And the blade steel here is not the toughest either. And you have a hollow grind on this knife, which is not the toughest grind either, but tough enough, I would say, for this knife. And the lock itself with this deadbolt mechanism here is incredibly strong. We've kind of done stupid things testing some of these knives with this lock and have had no problems with them whatsoever. To operate the lock, you simply push on the pivot right there. It is moving the lock itself, and you can see this shape on the back is where it gets its name. It looks like the latch on the inside of a deadbolt mechanism. You've actually got 2 bars of steel going through the tang of the knife, one on each end of the deadbolt key right there. Allows it to have very strong lockup. This is an assisted opening knife, but on the large tonto bladed version like this, if you give it a little muscle, you can actually flick it closed like that as well, which is nice, and does finger safe as well. Nice, reliable action, sturdy feel in the hand. You've got full length liners with just a few holes in it to match up with the handles right here. Feels plenty durable. $145 though, so not crazy expensive. What do you get? This is another one, the last one though on the table today, where we look to the rest of its sister lineup. The M16 04KS comes in about $60. And with that, you've got a stainless steel frame lock, thinner, but it still is a frame lock. You've got that durability. You've got, that finger squeeze extra capability on it. And essentially the same blade profile right here. The steel, however, is 12C27, a Sandvik Swedish stainless steel. So what I would kind of say here is the deadbolt probably gives you the stronger lock and handle than the frame lock version here, but the steel itself is tougher than the D2. It's not going to hold an edge like the D2 will, but the steel itself is going to be tougher. That's a nice thing too. Next up, the Benchmade Adamas, a Shane Siebert design. This is a crossbar locking knife, so again, you've got that finger safe closing action, and this hard use tactical knife is very purpose driven. $325 for this. For that, you've got chunky liners, a little bit of skeletonization, but some thickness to the steel liners itself, and a very tough 3.8-inch blade with crew wear blade steel. Very high toughness, very high edge retention. Not a stainless steel, however, but it's got really, really nice properties on that toughness front. Because of how tough that steel is, they could afford to go a little bit thinner on the blade stock. It's not super thin, but it's on the thinner side for what we've got on the table today, at least. But the extra toughness of that steel and the stout saber height flat grind here also are going to give it more durability overall. Plenty of length on the handle, even for if you are wearing gloves, like the M16 did that too, I should mention. Nice aggressive finger guard, nice ability for that wrist flick open and close, washers in the pivot, so it's nice and durable even in dusty and gritty environments. This was a harder one, honestly, to match up. There are some things we've already seen on the table that kind of give similar vibes, even if they don't give you the same locking mechanism. The Tellus FLK for one, sort of, a little bit. The SR-1, actually. If you go with the Lite version for $40, kind of feels like they're attacking a similar niche, just in different ways. Kind of surprise here off the table. Go back to the M16 for a second. There's a crossbar locking version of that knife as well. It comes in about $85, and it's worth mentioning at the very least. Blade shapes are different. You can only get it in the combo edge, but again, nice roomy handle, the crossbar lock, less of a finger guard though, and doesn't quite have the same, just solid feel of rigidity that the Adamas does, even though handle-wise, the construction is fairly similar, right down to the speed holes as well. In the end, I'm going with this knife, however. Let me know if I'm wrong. I should have gone with the others instead. The Kershaw Broadside right here. Price on this is just under $80. You've got a 3.5-inch blade, a little bit shorter overall than in the blade and in the handle than the Adamas, but it comes down, the reason I went with this is that feel in the hand. Steel is D2. It's not as thick as the Adamas, so it has a little more of that slicing focus as opposed to real hard use, but it feels hard use enough. I know that's a very subjective thing, so I apologize if you disagree, but the handles themselves, non-speed hold, non-skeletonized, full length, unmolested liners on the inside, giving this a weight that is just reassuring in the hand and grants you that feeling that you can really push the knife. It just feels really nice. Finger guard, less obtrusive than the Adamas, but there is a bit of one there. KVT ball bearings in the pivot, so you don't have the washers in this case. But this feels like the right comparison or the right budget alternative for me. At least it's the one I'm offering to you. Let me know if you've got a different opinion or better option in the comments. All right, next up I want to talk Spyderco, and the kind of the default answer for many folks when you talk about like the toughest Spyderco folder, the hardest use Spyderco folder, a lot of folks will point to the Shaman right here. It has a slightly thicker blade than many Spydercos. It has, instead of a full flat grind, it's slightly lowered down, so you've got a little more full thickness spine, and you've got a pretty durable drop point shape. And the compression lock on these Spyderco knives is a very strong locking mechanism as well. It also gives you finger safe closing operation. However, I'm going to sit here and argue for a different knife as my kind of more preferred recommendation for a real hard use Spyderco folder. I'm going with the Caribbean. Let me tell you why. First off, you've got a bit more handle, or a bit more usable handle, I would say, especially for folks with big hands wearing big work gloves. This feels very easy to gain full control over the knife. Although the handles are flatter and slightly skinnier than the Shaman, the rounded contours here should grant it more comfort. If you're back behind the finger choil, you've got a little bit less of that full feeling. You can certainly choke up, of course, to make up for that, but then you're losing a bit of edge. The Caribbean is going to give you significantly more sharpened edge. All of those things could kind of be argued one way or the other, but it's going to come down to the blade steel on offer, in particular itself, on these two knives. Yes, the Caribbean has a slightly thinner blade. Yes, it has a full flat grind, so the geometry overall is a little bit more slender. But the LC200N blade steel on this Caribbean pushes it over the top. That material is essentially a very tough ball bearing steel that is very nearly stain proof as well. There's something to be said for that in a hard use knife. Not only do you have toughness, you can also care a little bit less about the knife, and it's not going to come back to bite you essentially. The internals, this is part of Spyderco's Salt series, which means everything inside is designed to be nearly as stain proof as possible as well. You've still got the compression lock, you've got the nice tough steel. Technically, I would say the sheep's foot bladed version of this knife is even tougher because that tip itself is a bit more robust overall. I think this works really nicely. You got plenty of grip as well. But the reason I put the leaf-shaped or spear point, drop point version on the table is this was the hardest one, I think, to arrive at a budget conclusion, and the sheep's foot just made it even harder. So I made it easier on myself. In the end, what I went with is this, the CJRB Resource. $244 and some change for the Caribbean, whereas the Resource comes in at about $67 right here. Like the Caribbean, it has got that big usable handle. Actually very remarkably close in terms of that usable handle length right there, as you can see. So feeling the hand is not that dissimilar. And also like the Caribbean, you've got a long blade. 4.18 on the Resource, so it's even longer than the Caribbean's 3.7. You can see the gain in the sharpened edge right there. Little bit thinner than the LC200N blade on the Caribbean and not going to be as tough, but the steel here is RPM 9, which is essentially a spray form version of 9CR series stainless steel, which is an entry-level steel for sure. But that spray form process of creating it does make it a little bit tougher. So you got a little bit of extra toughness on a big, long, slicier blade. You've got plenty of handle to work with. You've even got ridges on the handle. Not like the same ridges as the Caribbean, but enough to work for this video, I would say, in any case. What do you folks think? Is there a better budget alternative to the Caribbean? If so, I'm stumped. Let me know in the comments. All right, next up we have the Microtech MSI. $250 for this particular version right here with a G10 milled handle. Injection molded versions come in a bit above the $180 mark at this point in time. We've got a almost 3.9 inch blade, M390 MK blade steel here, which for all intents and purposes is just a highly, highly precise formulation of M390, which is not the toughest steel, but you've got thickness here to counterbalance that a bit. And you've got Microtech's ram lock, which operates similar to a crossbar lock. You work with the lock the same way, but instead of a steel crossbar pushing into the tang of the blade, you have this massive chunk of steel with a coil spring driving it forward. Feels extremely, extremely secure, and you've got a ton of blade to work with as well. This one was kind of tough too, to find a budget alternative, but in the end, I would suggest the Bestech Slasher, the 3.5 inch bladed versions of it. There's a 3-inch bladed version as well, but that's significantly a different thing. $65 for this D2 steel. On the thinner side with a higher flat grind. It's not super thick, so the blade itself is not going to have the same degree of toughness as other metals might allow it to have. But you've got the crossbar lock there. Again, not the same, but you operate it in the same fashion as the ram lock there. And actual sharpened edge, not too far different, as you can see right there. So you're not giving up a whole heck of a lot in terms of usable edge. And of course, ergonomics are highly subjective. Everyone's hands are going to be a little bit different. I actually find the Slasher to be slightly more comfortable in my hands. Your mileage may vary. This is going to offer you that similar kind of high utilitarian vibes of the blade. Doesn't quite have the same swagger as the MSI does, however. I will definitely give this knife the nod there. Well, since that Slasher is getting on the smaller side, that's probably the smallest blade length we've looked at so far. Well, the Brat near the front is about a 3.5 inch blade. You don't necessarily need a big, long blade to have a hard use knife. You can have some more compact stuff. And there are one real icon we got to look at in that realm, and that is the DPx HEST. Stout bulldog of a knife that just doesn't quit. This is the HEST F 4.0. This is in the 4th generation of this folder right here. $285 for this one. 3.15 inch blade, Magna Cut steel, and thick. Combined with a frame lock, we're going all the way back to the beginning with the frame lock here. It is just stout overall, made for indiscriminate use and to not fail on you when the chips are down. Other steels are available too. You've got M390s, so not as tough, but again, you have that same kind of thickness going on. You've got sculpted titanium. There's some CPM 154 smaller versions of it. That's a fairly tough steel as well. Handle length there just barely fits my slightly larger than average hands, but it is a full feeling grip. You've got the frame lock going on with the flipper and the thumb studs. Previous versions of this knife did have that roto block that LionSteel had, because LionSteel did make some of these HEST versions. In fact, this one might still be, it is actually, you can see it there on the inside. But they've sort of ditched the roto block in the last generation here. Might have even done before so you don't get that anymore, which is unfortunate, but it is still a super solid folder. Wire breaker jimping here on the spine, and you've got this unique notch in the handle, which they say operates as a bottle opener, but it also opens as a pocket deployer, allowing you to, as you draw the knife from the pocket, you can catch it on the hem of your pocket if you know how to angle it, and that'll deploy the blade as you draw it. So it's ready to go real fast, and you can put it to work. That piece right there is what allowed me to find a decent budget alternative to this. And that is going to be the Kershaw Emerson collaboration CQC 6K right here. for about $52. 3¼ inch blade. The tip to handle ratio here, or the tip of the knife to the leading edge of the handle, is almost the same feeling actually. You do get a tiny bit more length on the Kershaw, a tiny bit more sharpened edge. And you've got some of the same features. We've got G10 for the front scale, just like this version of the HEST that I showed you. You've got a frame lock on the back, stainless steel instead of titanium, but you've got the frame lock. And you've got the original pocket deployer, the Emerson Wave, or the Emerson pocket deployer right there, giving you that same type of functionality. Blade itself is definitely not going to equal the same toughness factor as the HEST. Not only is it thinner, it's also featuring D2 steel, and it features a hollow grind. So the edge itself is significantly thinner and built of a less tough alloy than the HEST. But this is not bad. This is still something that's gonna work hard. It is something that's very affordable at $52 and gives you some similar vibes, I think. Again, as with any of these, if there's any better suggestions you have for a budget alternative, comment section is where you should drop them. Last but not least, another compact hard use powerhouse, the Lil Temperance 3 from Spyderco. Starts at $135 for VG10 version, so pretty reasonable. VG10 blade steel on those, which is decently tough enough for most folkses. The K390 versions, however, I would argue are even more so. Again, K390 is not the toughest carbon steel out there, but it is decent. And you've got extra thickness. Even with the full flat grind on this knife, you've got a thick spine for durability. You've got the compression lock, which we've already talked about, the strength of that lock right there. And you've got a full length grip on the handle despite a mere 2.92 inches on the blade itself. So you can really work the length you've got quite effectively. It's about $172 and some change for this version. Budget alternative. Now the sort of the logical or the visually similar knife you could look at is the Persistence right here, but it's not what I'm gonna recommend actually. The Persistence is about $60. Blade is slightly shorter. It doesn't have the same feel in the handle that that makes the Lil Temperance 3 so nice. Instead, I would go with the Efficient. Now, ergonomically and visually, these are two pretty different beasts, but what the Efficient has, that the Lil Temperance 3 has, is a handle that when you grip it, feels exceptionally solid. We're just under $61 for this knife. You've got G10, thick liners here, thicker than average, and a steel backspacer giving you a super strong backbone upon which the rest of the handle is built. Blade steel is 8CR series stainless. It is thinner. It is a full flat grind. This is a bit more of a slicer than a tough beast, but so is the Persistence that we looked at right there. It's say maybe slightly thinner, but they're essentially the same thickness right there. I'm gonna go with the Efficient right here because you've got that handle. If you choke back, even on just this 3.5 finger length area, which for my hand size anyway, it still feels secure and it drops the tip down. Again, ergonomically very different from the Lil Temperance 3, but the handle is where it's at, and that's why I think this is a decent option for you. All right, folks, that is all I've got to show you today. Let me know what you thought. Hard use icons, are there good budget alternatives? Are some of these alternatives I presented good budget alternatives? Seriously, no is a perfectly acceptable answer in this case. So I would love to hear from you down below. If you've got any alternate suggestions, drop those down below as well. And to get your hands on any of these knives, check out the links in the description, which will take you to KnifeCenter.com. And if you've really decided you need to spend some good money to get your hard use folding knife, but you can't quite stretch it, check out our Sezzle payment options where you can break up payments into more manageable chunks. And don't forget about our long-running Knife Rewards program to get some free money on a future knife. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's all for now. Signing off. See you next time.